All right, legends, grab yourself a drink and pull up a chair because this week at the Alternative Pub, we're travelling back to a decade that completely changed horror cinema forever. The 1960s began with haunted houses, gothic mysteries, and old school chills. And by the end of the decade, despite all the peace and love hippie carry on, people were being stabbed in showers, pecked to death by birds, terrorized by psychic children, and eaten by the living dead. It was a decade where horror grew up. The monsters weren't hiding in castles anymore, they were living next door. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Or you could just call me a tosser in the comments. It's up to you, really. Anyway, let's get into it. All right, coming in at number 5 on the list is Village of the Damned. Now, this is one of the creepiest movies ever made, and it's not because of monsters or gore, but because of children. And let's be honest, children are terrifying enough without having supernatural powers. Village of the Damned tells the story of a quiet English village where every woman of childbearing age mysteriously falls unconscious. Months later, several of them give birth. Their children all have pale hair, glowing eyes, and an unsettling intelligence far beyond their years. They're not normal, and everyone knows it. What makes the film so effective is its atmosphere. The children don't shout or run around causing chaos. Instead, they calmly stare at people while reading their minds. It's unsettling, and the glowing eyes effect still works remarkably well over 60 years later. The children represent something alien living among us, something we don't understand, and something we can't control. The film is eerie, intelligent, and still capable of making your skin crawl. Coming in at number 4 on the list is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Now, sometimes when people are discussing horror movies from the 1960s, they tend to overlook this one, which in my opinion is a mistake, because Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is absolutely horrifying, just not in the traditional sense. There's no monster, no vampire, no werewolf. Instead, we get something arguably worse, a deeply toxic relationship between two sisters. Betty Davis and Joan Crawford are two former actresses living together in a decaying Hollywood mansion. One sister is confined to a wheelchair while the other is spiraling into madness, and things only get darker from there. Baby Jane is tragic, pathetic, cruel, and terrifying all at once. You never quite know what she's going to do, and that's what makes her so dangerous. The film thrives on the psychological tension, and it's uncomfortable viewing in the best possible way. It's proof that horror doesn't always need supernatural elements. Sometimes people are frightening enough, and Baby Jane is one of cinema's greatest nightmares. Coming in at number 3 is The Birds. Only Alfred Hitchcock could convince audiences that birds were terrifying and pull it off. The Birds begins as a fairly ordinary story, and then nature decides it's had enough of humanity. Without warning, birds start attacking people, and nobody knows why. And that's one of the film's greatest strengths. There's no explanation. No scientist arrives to tell us what's happening. No government expert appears with a solution. The attacks simply continue and get increasingly violent. The famous schoolyard sequence remains one of Hitchcock's greatest. The tension builds slowly until chaos finally erupts. It's a masterclass in suspense. There's also something uniquely unsettling about the film's premise. If you're afraid of sharks, you can not go in the water. If a house is haunted, you can run out the front door. But birds, they're everywhere. You walk outside and instantly you realise you're surrounded. Suddenly, that pigeon sitting on a power line doesn't look so friendly anymore. Coming in at number 2 on the list is Night of the Living Dead. If other movies from the 1960s changed horror, then Night of the Living Dead completely detonated it. George Romero's low-budget masterpiece didn't just create the modern zombie film, it rewrote the entire rulebook. The story is simple. The dead begin rising from their graves. A group of strangers barricade themselves inside a farmhouse and attempt to survive. What follows is one of the most influential horror films ever made. Modern audiences might not realize just how shocking this film was in 1968. The violence felt brutal and the ending bleak. The overall tone was miles away from the safer horror films audiences had become used to. There was no heroic rescue, no comforting conclusion, just despair. Romero's zombies also changed the genre forever. Before this film, zombies were generally associated with voodoo traditions in films such as White Zombie. But after Night of the Living Dead, the flesh-eating undead became the blueprint for zombie horror moving forward. And finally, my number 1 horror film from the 1960s, Psycho. Maybe not a surprise choice, but sometimes the obvious answer is the right answer. Psycho changed cinema. Hitchcock took audiences somewhere they had never been before. The film begins like a crime thriller and then halfway through pulls the rug completely out from under you. The famous shower scene remains one of the most iconic moments in movie history. And what really makes the film special isn't the violence, it's the psychology. Norman Bates is one of the creepiest characters ever created. He's polite, awkward, and deeply unsettling. You spend much of the film unsure whether to fear Norman or feel sorry for him, and that's thanks in no small part to Anthony Perkins' fantastic performance. It's horror built almost entirely on tension and character, and it works brilliantly. More than 60 years later, Psycho still feels modern. And there we have it. The 1960s transformed horror forever. Village of the Damned gave us nightmare children. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane showed us how terrifying people can be. The Birds helped turn nature into a threat. Night of the Living Dead reinvented the zombie. And Psycho helped create modern psychological horror. Together, these films pushed horror into darker and more challenging territory. And the genre, it's never looked back. Let me know in the comments, what are some of your favourite horror films from the 1960s? And anyway, cheers.